1, 0.
The countdown ahead of a historic liftoff. And then a perfect hug in space. All done with clockwork precision. Two historic milestones for India's space sector, separated by 17 days. In these 17 days, from its launch to the successful spacecraft docking, India's SpaceX mission created history.
Now we can declare that the SpaceX docking has been achieved successfully.
But the mission took much more time than these 17 days. India's SpaceX or space docking experiment was 5 years in the making after getting an official nod in 2016. On 30th December 2024, India launched 2 satellites on ISRO's workhorse PSLV C-60 rocket. And then came a few hiccups. On 6th January 2025, ISRO postponed docking in space from 7th to 9th January after identifying an abort scenario. More simulations were carried out on the ground to improve the accuracy of docking. Then on 8th January, ISRO postponed the 9th January docking too after the satellites drifted more than anticipated during a maneuver to reduce the distance to 225 meters on the previous day. After this, the satellites drifted nearly 5 kilometers apart and maneuvers to bring them closer were restarted. Then on 12th January, a trial and data analysis was held. The satellites were brought closer together, and this time they reached the hold point of 3 meters before being moved away to a safe distance. And then came the big day, 16th January, the day the docking was done successfully. ISRO's SpaceX mission consisted of 2 relatively small spacecraft, Target and Chaser. Each weighed about 220 kilograms and were launched together into space. They were injected with slightly different force to allow them to attain a separation of about 20 kilometers while keeping them in the same orbit around Earth, about 470 kilometers from the surface. Then, as you know, the satellites were brought progressively closer in stages before being docked together. After the docking, ISRO showed another crucial capability, this time by controlling the joint satellites as a single unit. But the mission is not over yet. There is more to go. The next phase of the mission involves undocking maneuvers and power transfer tests between the satellites. So the satellites, which carry several scientific payloads, will eventually be undocked to carry out the scientific objectives over the next 2 years. India's SpaceX mission has gone down as one of the most historic moments in its space journey. With this mission, India launched itself into the elite club of space-faring giants: the United States, Russia, China, and now India. Just imagine the distance India's space sector has covered over the decades. When the erstwhile Soviet Union and US were racing to the moon and building their space empires, when the Americans were sending astronauts to walk on the moon and the Soviets were showcasing their space stations, India was transporting satellite parts on cycles and bullock carts and waiting in queue to use second-hand equipment from these powerful nations. The world has watched America and Russia rule the space for decades, but now it is India's turn to lead. With this mission, there is no looking back for India. So why is a successful space docking experiment such a big deal? Docking refers to the joining together of 2 or more fast-moving objects in space. This is a complex maneuver that requires great precision and advanced scientific capabilities. That's because satellites in space move at very high speeds. For docking to happen, they have to move at exactly the same speed, so that relative to each other, they are almost stationary. The smallest of errors can lead to complete destruction of satellites. The docking capability is necessary for carrying out missions that require heavy spacecraft that a single launch vehicle may not be able to lift into space in one go. Most large space assets, particularly those that involve two-way journeys from and to Earth, are made of several parts that are taken one at a time and then integrated in space. For instance, docking capability is essential to set up a space station for which separate modules are joined in space. Docking is also essential to transport crew and supplies to it. The size of the International Space Station, or ISS, can be imagined to be as big as a typical 6-bedroom house in the United States. It cannot be launched into space at one go. The ISS has various modules that were launched separately and were then brought together in space. It is kept running as modules carrying astronauts and supplies from Earth periodically dock with it. These modules also bring older crew back to Earth. Similarly, spacecraft taking humans to the moon have multiple components. A part of the spacecraft has to detach and then land on the moon and then integrate on the return journey. So docking is a critical step towards achieving several future goals, from bringing back a lunar sample to setting up a space station and sending a human to the moon. Now, as you know, India is only the 4th country after the United States, Russia and China to demonstrate this capability. Let's see when and how the other 3 countries did it. The United States. As the US and the erstwhile Soviet Union competed to send humans to the moon, it was essential to demonstrate rendezvous and docking. So in 1966, NASA's Gemini 8 became the first spacecraft to dock with the target vehicle Agena. Gemini 8 was a crewed mission orbiting the Earth. It was commanded by Neil Armstrong, who in 1969 became the first human to set foot on the moon. In 1967, the USSR demonstrated the first uncrewed automated docking of the Cosmos 186 and Cosmos 188 spacecraft. In 2011, China demonstrated its docking capability when the unmanned Shenzhou 8 spacecraft docked with the Tiangong 1 space laboratory. A year later, China demonstrated its first crewed space docking when its astronauts manually joined its Shenzhou 9 spacecraft to the same space laboratory. So what's the purpose of India's SpaceX mission? ISRO has a vision of setting up a space station by 2035 and of sending a human to the moon by 2040. It has been working on key technologies to realize this vision. Besides a new heavy liftoff vehicle capable of carrying up to 30 tons to low Earth orbit, these missions would require docking capability. The Bharatiya Antariksh Station, or India's space station, will be built by bringing together 5 modules in space. The first of these robotic modules is slated to be launched in 2028. Docking capability will also be required for the next lunar mission, Chandrayaan-4, which will bring back samples from the moon. It will see 5 key modules being sent into orbit in 2 launches. A human mission to the moon is likely to follow a similar plan. So the significance of this technology cannot be overstated. It is essential for future space station operations, satellite servicing, and deep space missions. And so it opens up new possibilities for India's future space endeavors. ISRO's automated docking capabilities mean that 2025 has started on a triumphant note for India's space sector, from preparation for its human space flight Gaganyaan to Earth observation and navigation systems, from government programs to private sector initiatives. India stands ready to write new chapters in its space story, one mission at a time. A successful SpaceX mission redefines India's position in the global space community and sets the stage for even more ambitious projects. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you in the next episode with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munmin Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.